And welcome back to Inclusive Design 24-2020, brought to you with thanks to all our supporters, Barclays Access, Adobe, Intopia, Tetralogical, Infoaxia, Intuit, Webable TV, Adrian Roselli, LLC, and DQ Systems. A reminder that our community is a respectful one, and you'll find our code of conduct linked off every page of our website, inclusivedesign24.org. If you want to catch up with the action, you can follow at ID24Conf on Twitter. And if you have questions for our presenters, we really hope you do, please use the ID24 hashtag. Carrie, who's up next?
I am very pleased to present Honey Over Vinegar, Winning Strategies for Digital Inclusion. And that's by the lovely Lainey Feingold, Lucy Greco, and Stuart Hay.
Thank you, Carrie, and good evening, morning, afternoon, whatever time of day or night it is for you. I am Lucy Greco. I am an accessibility evangelist at UC Berkeley, and we are going to talk today about 3 different strategies that we think will help get much more accessibility in any organization, be big or small. And I am now going to pass to Lainey.
Thanks, Lucy. Thanks, ID24 2020 team. It's a great event. I'm glad to be part of it. I'm Lainey Feingold. I'm a disability rights lawyer, and I work on digital accessibility issues, and I believe in collaboration. And I guess, many people know me here. I guess the new thing I want to say is, as of yesterday, I have a refreshed website, and it's lflegal.com, and I invite you to check it out. You can find out more about me. I'll give it to Stuart.
Thanks for that, Lainey. I'm Stuart Hay. I am, unlike Lucy and Lainey, I'm not located in San Francisco. I'm out of Sydney, Australia, and I'm one of the co-founders for Intopia. I also, when I'm not doing Intopia stuff, I also help run a lot of the events we have here in Australia, such as Alley Bites and Alley Camp. And I feel for some of the pain of the wonderful ID24 organizers and some of the technical issues they've had so far. So they're doing great work to get this all going. So kudos to them. Lucy, I'll hand back to you.
Thanks for reminding me. I forgot to mention that we are an actual international panel for you. I am from Canada, Lainey from the US, and Stuart from Australia, as he said. So, although I'm based in California right now. So I'd like to go to our first slide, I think, Stuart, or is it up?
Yep, we're on it.
All right, so our first point that we want to talk about today is recognizing people and recognizing that disability and accessibility is all about people. It's not something that you have to think very hard about, because if you just sit back and go, oh yeah, that's something that affects people, and recognizing people is really important. So we have an image on the screen for our blind viewers that is a variety of different people, and it's everything from people with disabilities and different races, walks of life. Our whole idea is that when you recognize that accessibility is about people and working for people, you're going to have a much better effect in the products that you use. Your products are going to work for more people, and your products are going to be more accessible.
I think
I'll pass it off.
Lucy, one of your dogs wants to weigh in on why it's important.
He's saying,
unless anyone could speak dog, we're going to just ignore Lucy's.
Yeah, he's saying, let me into the room.
Lainey, why don't you jump in there while Lucy is looking after the dogs?
Yeah, so what we're doing, like we said in the title, we're talking about honey over vinegar, strategies that work for digital inclusion. We're not going to talk about the strategies that don't work, but I am compelled to say right here that the vinegar, instead of recognizing people, is thinking about checklists or thinking about automatic fixes. So I want to give over 2 points on recognizing people. One is Black disabled lives matter. And in the US, as everybody knows, and I'm not as familiar with what's happening on this around the globe, Of course, there's a lot of attention. There always has been in the Black community. There's more attention now in the white community around Black people and police violence and murder of innocent people. What there's less attention on is how much Black disabled people are impacted by the racism in the American criminal justice system. People who are deaf and may not hear a police order, or people who are autistic, or Black people who have mental illness, who have co-identities that really put them at higher risk. What I'd like to put over here is how are we going to apply those Black Lives Matter principles to our work in accessibility? And this is not a whole talk about that, but I just want to give it out that when we're talking about recognizing people, and we know that disabled people have to be included as employees, as contractors, as testers, as designers, as code writers, as engineers, let's make sure that we're including people of color, Black people, Native American people in that group. So that's one thing. Black disabled people matter when we're talking about recognizing people. And then the other thing is advocates are not wretched complainers. So I'm a lawyer, and in law, the person who files a lawsuit is called a plaintiff. Well, it turns out that the word plaintiff means wretched complainer. So I practice a collaborative kind of law called structured negotiation. I don't use the word plaintiff for that reason. And I think whatever your role, you can think, how are we looking at the people who bring accessibility barriers to our attention? Do we say, thank you so much for bringing that to our attention. You've just helped us make our product better and increase sales and have a better culture. No, a lot of times we say, why is this person complaining about something? So what we can do to recognize people as bringing forth real issues that are going to make our products better is really an important aspect of recognizing people. So, Stuart.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those important things with the strategies about the co-collaboration and involving people with disability in particular. I mean, there's the old saying, nothing about us without us. I take two angles to this. I take that angle when I'm talking with people and I'm trying to work with people, because I'm usually a little bit down that business development marketing side of things. But there is another angle to this as well, which I like to try and remind people of, which is the people we're trying to connect with and invest into doing accessibility are people as well. And there's a diversity of those people that we need to figure out a way of how do we motivate them to pay attention to accessibility, to take accessibility seriously, to do something about it. And that's also an important element that we have to consider in the whole almost 360-degree view of all the people we're interacting with and representing. And so it's really important for us to understand that these people we are trying to communicate to and try to bring to the well of accessibility, we need to work out the way to influence them. We need to recognize that they are also very diverse sorts of people. They all have those different motivators, they have different priorities, they have their own different stresses as well. And it's part of our responsibility as being advocates and accessibility experts to connect with those people. So for me, it's definitely, it's a two-directional thing. We have one direction where we're trying to represent this diversity of a community here, and we want them involved in everything we're doing. But we also have a very diverse community of people we're trying to talk with, and work with to convince them that this is important things they need to be paying attention to. And I come at this from the Australian perspective, where we don't have a lot of strong legislation or laws to enforce accessibility. So we look at trying to build up the awareness of accessibility using a lot of these other soft techniques around building these sort of connections with people, which we'll talk about more in a second. But it all is fundamentally based on recognizing that we have a whole host of different people that we're working with. Lucy, we got a minute or two, and you got cut a little bit off at the start there. Anything you want to add to what Lainey and I have already mentioned?
Well, I think this actually works beautifully, because you both brought up a lot of really important points here that I wanted to bring up on this slide, which is that it's really important to include people with disabilities and people of all different walks of life and all different shapes and sizes in your projects, in your products, in your company, in your business, because it's really key to note that these people are the only way you're going to actually have a product that works for everyone. If you have two generic Well, let's be bold and say nerdy coding men creating a product. That product might work for coding nerdy men, but won't work for, the mother at home, the grandmother in her, with her children. It won't work for the disabled person because those two men have no experience and no life practices to bring to the table. And if you actually think about people and hire these people with disabilities, this is a big theme for me, is it's really important to hire people with disabilities to be part of your teams and be on your projects and participate in the design, the coding. It's really hard to have a product that somebody on your own team can't use. Nobody's going to create a product that, one or two members of the team can't use it. It just doesn't make sense.
Excellent. Well, Lucy, I'm going to go to the takeaway points we had pulled together for this. So a couple of the takeaway points from our three perspectives. One is involve a diverse range of people, and it should be diverse around not just disability, but race and age and everything else that is out there. Involve them both in your teams and add them to your workforce where you can. The next takeaway point for us is go beyond testing. So testing is great, but it's that co-collaboration and involving people with disabilities and others into the whole process, which is going to make for a better output or outcome. And as Lucy was just saying as well, when you address a variety of needs, you definitely will build a better product for all. And it's not just reaching the individuals, but as we've said a few times, well, I think as the community always says, if you are building for this broader wealth of people, then what ends up happening is it just gets easier for a lot of people in the community to use systems. It's a more usable environment, which we know is beneficial for everybody. So all great points, hopefully, for people to take away from that.
Stuart, before you go to the next slide, I just want
Yes, Lainey.
I want to say something at the top, which is the way this panel came together is Stuart is in the marketing side. He has a business of accessibility consultancy, which I highly recommend for anyone who wants to and can hire someone in Australia. Stuart's a marketer. Lucy runs teams and is the accessibility evangelist at UC Berkeley, and I'm a lawyer. And it came to us listening to each other's presentations over the year that we're using the same strategies. And that this is why you have the three of us, because what works in law to convince companies to do the right thing and what works in teams and what works in sales are pretty much these four takeaways that we want to give you. And I just also want to say that this is a 50-minute presentation. We spent a lot more time than 50 minutes preparing it. And I say that because there were so many ideas and we have boiled them down into these four points with three takeaways each. So I feel these are the things that really rose to the top. They're universal. We hope they're global. So I just want to set the frame there for the rest of the presentation. So I think we're on to the our next boiled up strategy.
I'll pay you $50 later, Lainey, for the shout out. So
okay.
We'll go beyond that one for the moment. So our next major sort of strategy takeaway point that we want to pose to everyone is it's building relationships. So we've got an image on the slide here, and the image is of a lot of little profile pictures of people all connected with various dashed lines and solid lines and little indicators around the nature of that relationship connection between people. Sometimes it might be a heart or more of a social relationship. It could be a financial relationship. It could be an interest relationship. And for me, and building on what Lainey was saying, is that I ultimately come down to this. It's about connecting with people and trying to create that relationship with people. And it's only until you've built a relationship with someone that you generally have that opportunity to start to convince them about a different argument. And unfortunately, too often we get into these polar extremes of discussions without realizing that we have to work together to come to an outcome. So for me, when I'm trying to connect with an organization to try to help educate them and build awareness around accessibility, what I'm focused on is how did I build that relationship with them? And part of that building relationship with someone it's how do I generate value with them? How do I sort of help them give something to them first? How do I make the interaction as easy as possible to work with so that ultimately at the end of the day, something might come from that? Now, I know there's a little bit of scientific stuff out there around neurolinguistics, which is around this idea that it usually takes about 7 interactions for someone to actually build a strong relationship with somebody else. Now, there's a good way of this and there's a bad way. What I tell you now, do not use the bad way, because the bad way for this is what we see a lot, where you get a bit of clickbait. Someone says, here's a white paper, give us your email address. And then based on the email address, we'll start to spam you with interactions because they think it's about 7 interactions. It's not about 7 interactions. It's about 7 positive interactions you have with people. You have to, as I said earlier, you've got to give people value. You've got to provide some benefit to them in that. You have to build some trust. You've got to build authenticity around all of that. If you've done all the right things, what it leads to is a situation where you may have a better opportunity to talk with them about accessibility and helping them come to an outcome that's going to be hopefully useful for the whole community. And I say this from that sales perspective of going, I have a whole company that we don't do any active marketing. It's all about building relationships with people. And we've grown that company purely on the relationships and the word of mouth recommendations that comes off of that. And we don't get those if you haven't built those strong relationships and shown value to people. So that's some of my points. Who shall I throw to next? Lucy, maybe I'll throw to you. We'll let Lainey wrap this one up.
So for me, relationships has been the ultimate success. It's the way I've been able to get people to engage is by forming relationships. And as Stuart said, the positive relationships are the really important thing. So when I do a review, I am very clear with individuals and the people I'm working with that I am a person with a disability and I'm here to work with you and I'm here to help you. I don't get very aggressive with them and say, you know, you need to make this work for me. I'm always there to help you. I'm always there to be friendly. And, you know, it helps sometimes when I bring cake. It always helps when I bring cake. But it's also that relationship. You know, I come in the room, I am this friendly person, I'm cheerful, and no matter how bad the interaction is with the application, they want to please me. And I'm the person that they think of when they're working on the thing in the future. And, you know, even that cute dog on the floor, if I can't draw them in with the cake, the cute dog on the floor makes them interested. It's all part of the relationship. You know, you go in, you're friendly, you're happy, you're cheerful, and you're there to help. And you're not only there to help, you're there to help make it better. You're not there to keep them from getting sued and make sure that they're crossing all their I's and dotting all their T's, all the rest of that. It's very, very much let's build this ongoing relationship. And you know, they see you and you become honest and genuine. And as Stuart says, they start to trust you and they start to turn to you for help. And then you can turn to them for help in making what you're working on more accessible. It's really a very important relationship. Lainey?
Yeah, well,
Sounds great.
In my world of law, relationships are not like so valued, you know, in traditional law. And I think the reason for that is people are stuck in their roles. You know, there's the lawyer for the blind person, and there's the lawyer for the company, and then the blind person is the plaintiff, who, as we said before, is the wretched complainer, and then the expert is something else. So one of the things I love about practicing collaborative law and structured negotiation, it lets us break down those roles and take off those hats. And I really agree with what Stuart and Lucy said, that the really best way to achieve accessibility is to build relationships between the decision makers and their disabled customers. And they have to see all our points relate. They have to see the disabled person, the blind person, the person who filed the bug report as a customer, not as someone complaining. So part of my new website design is that I have dolphins swimming in the header. And the reason for the dolphins is because I have developed this idea that typically in advocacy, people feel if you're a shark, you're stronger, you're better. If you're hard, you're caring more. And, you know, someone asked me, I did a presentation, actually it was in Canada. They said, well, how can you be friendly and nice when you're talking about civil rights? And, you know, every kind of case is different. And there's, of course, a place for anger and that. But I have found that practicing what I call the dolphin skills, communicating, building trust, listening, like Stuart said before, when we are trying to convince somebody to do something, they're people too. We need to listen to them. You know, I've been in situations I worked on talking prescription labels, and the pharmacists were like, we don't want to do talking prescription labels. And, you know, if we were in a court situation, we'd be writing a brief. That's, you know, terrible. They should do it because blind people can't take medication safely. Well, you know what? We had to listen to the pharmacists who were actually afraid that if they gave the talking label to the blind person would mishear it and take medication accidentally. Well, we thought that was stupid because without a label that talks, the blind person gets no information. But nonetheless, to build a relationship with the pharmacist, we had to put aside our assumptions, try to get at what made them afraid to do what we wanted to do. And I think in building relationships, one of the really key factors is recognizing the fear that people hold around our issues for many reasons. And in my book, I have a ton of stories about the fear of the pharmacists. And there's a million ways in which fear comes up when we don't try to go underneath it and build relationships with the people who we need to get something from. So that's
I'm
my...
going to pull you up there, Lainey. Because we want to keep to time. And I think, Lainey, the real quick point for her is that, like, we also think the same thing about being non-judgmental. We'd rather not end up with a take it or leave it type scenario. That's the absolute worst case scenario. If an organization does nothing or a person does nothing, it's great. We want to do everything, but based on a lot of people I've spoken with, it's better to get them to do something. And building off what Lainey just said there as well. So a couple of our takeaway points from, sorry, Lucy.
Sure. I just want to make one point is that, you know, the one thing that Lainey was talking around and working around is that the relationship we formed caused us to trust each other. So I've worked with Lainey on many cases, and forming a relationship with the other side, we become people who are working on the problem together, and they trust us to tell us that fear. They trust us to tell them the difficulty and come up with the solution together.
Yeah, that's it. So our takeaway points for this strategy is be approachable. No one wants to work with the sourpuss or the person who's always going to be angry with you and evil with you and all the rest of the stuff. It's really part of this trick is being approachable with people. It's not a trick, but just good habit. Provide value when you're interacting with people. You don't want to be the person always taking from a relationship. It's got to be a two-way relationship. And build trust with people. So building trust is paramount, as Lucy just touched on, to enable hopefully more positive outcomes and positive benefits out of any of these interactions that we do. Telling stories. Lainey, we're over to you to kick this one off.
Okay, telling stories. Well, first, I really need to thank Stuart for finding this great image, which is a picture of an open book, an actual book, and then with line drawings kind of coming out of the book of all story elements, a house, people, ideas, nature, sunshine. And I love this because I think it gets to the core of why stories matter and what's a good story, because the book is open. We need to be vulnerable. We need to expose ourselves. We need to share things that actually matter. And two, the pictures are transparent. Like you can, you know, it's line drawing. So it's like you see through the house. And transparency for accessibility, I think, is so important. I mean, this is why from the very beginning, I pushed accessibility statements. And honesty about where are you on your accessibility journey, and admitting and understanding that everybody's on the journey. You know, one of the things of many that I don't like about the one line of code software companies that have come into our space is that they're like, you know, they say one line of code will fix everything. And then they sell accessibility statements that say we're 100%, or, you know, we're the best because we use this tool. But a real story is based on transparency and based on honesty. And really the reason for the success of structured negotiation, which is a collaborative law I practice, I've been doing it since '95, is the stories that we have been able to tell companies about and with and by disabled people. So we had great relationship with Major League Baseball. They fixed their website, they did their app, they did all of the team apps. I'm forgetting how many teams there are. Because they met blind baseball fans who told them, you know, I'm a Boston fan, but I live in Chicago, and because your online radio isn't accessible to me, I can't listen to the game. Well, the Major League Baseball people, they wanted to hear that because they're fans too. When we did the ATM cases, which is where I started in the world of technology, we had a dozen blind people who were professionals who were traveling all over the world, and they couldn't get $20 of their own money out of an ATM machine because the technology wasn't accessible. And those stories, you know, the idea of show not tell is part of the whole storytelling, and law is so much like tell don't show, that as much as you can bring stories into whatever role you're in, whatever role, whoever you're trying to convince, I think it's probably the number one of our honey strategies. Lucy, over to you.
I'm going to pull you up there on that, Lainey. Yep. Jump to Lucy.
So stories have been really an effective way for me to teach accessibility. It's so much easier for somebody to understand a story and get involved and be engaged and smile and feel my pain and feel my happiness all at the same time. You know, I tell people that I've been using technology my entire life, and that my life is driven and formed by technology, and they start to wonder why. And when I tell the stories, is how they start to become a part of my, you know, form a relationship with me because of the stories. So I tell them, for example, I met my husband online in the early 80s. Well, they want to know what that meant. And then I tell them that yes, and my experience from then was, you know, as the internet became more popular in the 90s and the early 2000s, I had harder and harder times online. It was a good, interesting story. But to tell them the things that I was able to do with technology after the technology became available to me and became accessible is really impactful. The fact that when I was in high school, I would take 6 months to do a 1-month assignment. But when I got to university, I could hand my assignments in at the same time as everyone else because I had a computer, and that computer made it so I could actually keep up with the rest of the students and produce at the same rate they were. Or I could do research online versus going to a library and feeling paper books that just didn't have any Braille in them. Stuart.
No, Lucy, yeah, and focusing a little bit on time because I know we're running just a couple minutes beyond what we were planning for. So I'm going to keep mine a little bit on the shorter side. For me, the stories is all about how do we humanize this and how we humanize people. And we always hear, for me, I don't have a disability, but I obviously have lots of people I work with. And me growing up, I always heard like the negative stories, the negative stereotypes. So for me, I'm always about how do I put the more positive reality to this so that people realize this, and it's the positive stories that come from that. And it's been a focus of a lot of the events I've helped out with here in Australia about how do we get positive role models and examples that we can talk about so that everyone else just goes, oh, hold up. There's someone there that can do something that I never thought they could do. But it also has a positive outcome because when I was talking to Lucy, when we were preparing for this sort of presentation, I mentioned to her how I watched recently a documentary, as it's called Pick of the Litter. And it was all about the following these different little puppies and all the work that you have to go through to train them to be seeing eye dogs. And Lucy told me that the Guide Dogs USA, I think it is, the amount of donations they got that came out of just that episode and show, talking about that experience, for me, it was a great example of humanizing it. And just more recently, I love the fact that Able Gamers were able to get Ryan Reynolds to do a shout out for Able Gamers, but they did it in a fun way. Ryan Reynolds, in his usual way, basically saying he's waived his $237 million speaker fee, and having Steve Spawn's reaction to that in the little clip was fantastic. And it's all these little positive things that creates that emotional connection with people. But you've got to back it all up, and you've got to back it again with the authenticity and making sure that leads to a call to action at the end of it. Lainey, I'll throw back to you and our wonderful takeaway points for this one.
Yes, our takeaway points. What's good about stories? Stories have an emotional impact. We're debated whether to have a little asterisk there because, again, emotion can be a tricky thing when we're talking about disability, and we want to, of course, stay away from any triggered emotion that's, inspiration porn or pity or any of those kinds of emotion. But that aside, good stories, authentic stories have an emotional impact. They pique and hold interest. They bring energy to a message. And they, like Stuart just said, they cause us to take action, which is really why we're all here. So those are our takeaways. That's our honey, sharing stories. That brings us to
community. Form your communities. Is the slide up?
build your culture.
It is up, Lucy, but it's build culture, Lucy, we came out with, remember?
Right. Sorry,
I was being subtle.
We've had so many different conversations about this that it's all running as a blur in my head. So culture, what does it mean to have an accessible culture? What does it mean to have, a culture of accessibility? So the image here we have is hands, and hands of all shapes and sizes and colors, and holding, two hands holding the rest of them and kind of spreading out and growing. And from all the things we've just talked about, when you talk about real people and you talk about the second point, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting words. It's terrible.
Relationships.
Relationships. Those real people have relationships. And then you tell the stories of those relationships and those people. It gets people to have a culture of accessibility. The culture of accessibility means that everyone in the organization understands that it's important to have something be accessible. It's important to be inclusive. It's important to have, things that people do to make sure that accessibility is built in. We talk about this in our next slide, and I'm going to give you a sneak peek of one of the words in there that we have. Rituals. Rituals would be checking for accessibility, going through and seeing how to make sure it works for everyone and be consistent and patterned in it. But also having a group that you can turn to. This is a culture where everybody agrees and we're on the same page. In academia, we always say that leadership needs to buy in. Well, also the people at the bottom need to buy in, and the people in the middle need to buy in. And when you have a good culture of accessibility, everybody doesn't have to buy in because everybody's already there, and they all understand that the person next to them might be a little different and has different needs, but they're also someone that needs to be included in that final product. It really works. Sorry about getting the word wrong, guys.
That's okay, Lucy. Who do you want to throw to next?
I think I'll throw to you, Stuart.
Okay, thanks for that, Lucy. So for me, culture is an interesting one because I come from a management background and I've managed teams for longer than I would like to remember sometimes. But in management studies and speak, one of the things they always say is that culture is the hardest thing to change in any organization. And it is, and it's not easy, and it's tough. If you get it right, everything Lucy was just talking about just starts to flow and it all works. And that's our ultimate objective that we're aiming for. So part of the challenge we see in a lot of times is someone's a single advocate in an organization trying to convince the rest of the organization to do the right thing. And that is sometimes hard. And so what we have to remember is that culture is organic and it's pervasive. And like anything else, we need to constantly feed culture to grow it in the way we want it to occur. And part of being able to do that is you need to amplify your voice and make it not sound from one person. So I then start to look at culture a little bit from a brand recognition science, where what we're trying to do is have people recognize and understand that this brand of accessibility exists. And one of those techniques for me to be able to do that is it's not just repeating and building relationships with people, but it's amplifying the voice. And there's different little techniques people can do to do this. And one is not only just talking yourself, but use third-party tools like newsletters to amplify your voice. So putting out a newsletter once a month, it doesn't necessarily then look like it's coming from you. It also means things like bringing in external people to talk and do like lunch and learn brown bag sessions in the organization. Work at getting into the strategies of those organizations, start to build the procedures and processes. And when you start to do a lot of these little bits combined with all these other strategies we've discussed to date, that helps to start shifting the culture in an organization, shifting people's mindsets. And that collective is extremely powerful and important for an organization to eventually get it to the point where what we call at times as accessibility being part of the definition of done or writing it into an organization's DNA. That doesn't happen overnight. You just can't flick a switch or add it to a strategy document and have that happen. You've got to do all this hard work to get it to that point. Lainey, what do you think from your experience?
There's a couple things. I agree with what Stuart and Lucy said. You can't, it has to come from on top. It has to come from the bottom. We're trying to create a feel-good culture about accessibility. And the truth is, we are working against some heavy currents right now. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of, oh my God, we're going to get sued. And how do we get out from under that and make people feel this is a good thing? A couple of things that have really worked in the cases that I've done. One is valuing small steps, recognizing successes. I mean, when we started with Bank America, we got the first 5 talking ATMs. We did a press conference. We did a press release. We were so excited. We wanted 18,000 talking ATMs, which we did eventually get, but we celebrated those first 5 because people want to feel good about what they do. And working sort of with big companies, but from the outside, this has really become something I truly understand, is that I think people want to feel good about what they do, and we need to give them the opportunity to feel good about accessibility. And bringing, of course, hiring disabled people is the most important, but if you don't have a ramped up hiring with a lot of people with disabilities in it, like Stuart said, have a brown bag lunch with a community organization. Let people get to know each other and feel good about our issues. And then the other thing is, we have an accessibility culture. We have a global accessibility community. If you knew enough to be on ID24, then you are part of that. You know that exists. We need to spread that. I mean, after ID24, people should send this link to not necessarily our program, but the whole 24 hours to everybody, to say, look, this is not just a checklist. This is a community and a culture that can make you feel really good about your work. And of course, there's a business case. So yeah, I'm all about culture. So the takeaways on culture, I think we probably touched on them, but take small steps to improvement, create rituals and procedures to build support, which I have to say, rituals I thought was a spiritual thing, but Lucy and Stuart explained to me that it's now a corporate term. So it kind of goes to learn each other's language. That's part of listening. That's a dolphin skill. Learn the language of who you're trying to convince, who you're trying to sell, who you're trying to work with. Recognize and celebrate wins.
And Lainey, on that one, I'm going to interrupt you just real quickly. From a marketing speak, it's about knowing your audience as well. So it's that whole know your audience. Who are you communicating with? Are you communicating with developers, designers, product managers, diversity inclusion people, and then understand their language and connect with them through that language?
Yes, and recognize, the next thing, recognize. Has anyone noticed? Sorry, we didn't spell this out earlier because it's a visual element. Recognize we are spelling with an S because Stuart did the slides. And in the United States, we spell it with a Z. So that has two meanings here. First, again, know who you're speaking with, embrace their language. And two, accessibility is global, as we know from ID 24 hours. So this, I think, is part of culture, making people realize this is a global thing. I know personally for me, for my life, you get, it's that build a cathedral thing. You think you're just writing, you're writing a legal document or you're, testing something, but we're building a cathedral here. We're not just doing our own little jobs. We're building a cathedral of inclusion and grow community. So those are our takeaway points on that. I think our next slide is our contact information, which
So I have
we
one
can.
final point on that culture is that's
Yes.
really, really important is every single event I take part in as part of the accessibility culture around the world, everyone is helping one another. It's a really wonderful, comfortable, friendly community. There's not one person in this community that I dislike. There's not one person in this community who wouldn't offer up their help to everyone else in the community. I go to meetups and we have people there from companies that in every other industry and every other field that you think about are competitive, and they're helping each other and they're sharing code and they're sharing ideas and they're sharing strategies, because when you have that culture of inclusiveness and accessibility, everyone really likes each other and it's so much warmer and so much friendlier. I think it's really important to know that the culture of accessibility will actually make a better workplace and a better
That's
world.
great, Lucy. And
I think, Stuart, what do we have? 5 minutes for questions? So should we just?
amazing. We're at 41 minutes, which for 3 people, which was free forming most of this presentation, I think is incredible. I don't know, Lainey, if there's any last minute things you want to say before we pass back to Carrie with regards to any Q&A.
Yeah, let me just read out we have up here our Twitter and our emails. So we really encourage you to be in touch with us. And if you're not part of this community, be part of it. We're all on Twitter. I'm at LF Legal. Lucy is at Access Aces. Sorry. And Stuart probably has a whole presentation on why he's at Oh My Deity, OHMYDEITY. And we have our emails up here. Lucy's at lucy@accessaces.com. Stuart's at Stuart, it's STEWART @intopia.digital. And I'm at lf@lflegal.com. We would really love to hear from people about your top 4 honey over vinegar strategies, what you thought about the strategies that we bubbled to the top. And if you think about a specific situation you're in and you use one of these, let us know. Let us know how it worked. Let us know what it feels like Lucy said, to be friendly and bring cake and, better yet if you have a dog. So Carrie, do we have any questions?
We do, Lainey. We have 5 at least in the chat. I'm going to check Twitter while you answer some of these, but I'm not sure if we'll get to all of them or not, but we'll make sure that we get to them. We'll get them to you, the questions to you. So the first question is from JE, and he asks, during collaborative sessions, how do you overcome any initial friction and defensiveness that makes the session difficult to progress?
I think it's really important to tell people that, it's good to set ground rules at the very beginning, but it's also really important to tell people to listen to each other and give everyone an opportunity to show how they're a real person. But Lainey, Stuart?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. In structured negotiation, we work out the ground rules of the conversation before we actually have the conversation. So it's a way to build trust without the hot button issues coming up. But I can't really stress enough how much being friendly, it's very hard for other people to be defensive and closed and angry if you're being open and responsive. I mean, I think there's a whole brain science around that people kind of react how people around the table react. And we have to be the ones, even if we go home later and shut the door and like, oh my God, that person, they just drove me. Oh, they were so difficult. No, save it for your glass of wine after the session. We have to, kind of fake it till you make it. Maybe you'll end up in a really good relationship, or maybe you'll end up in a relationship that works for the thing, but it's not someone you'd want to really be close friends with. But we have to be the drivers of the feeling of collaboration that we want to create.
I'm just going to add one quick one, which is it's about creating safe spaces as well. A lot of people want to do the right thing, but they don't interact with the community, so they don't know what is always the right thing. So don't jump on them if they've inadvertently done something wrong or used the wrong language. It's not always coming from the wrong intention. To me, language is more about intention than it actually is about the words being used. So we try to foster that open, safe space for people and just say, hey, just remember, they're just other people, and you'll learn through that interaction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it kind of ties into the next question from Todd is, how do you educate someone like a stakeholder about inclusion and having testing with disabled users if they have these preconceived notions, or if they don't understand what disabled users are, or that they think they even have them going to their site? How do you get around that?
What was the very last part of what you said?
Sometimes people say, stakeholders will say, oh, we don't have disabled users using our products or our sites.
Can I jump in on that one, Lainey? So we actually had a client say that to us recently, and we actually showed him a demonstration of a blind user trying to actually navigate their site and talking about all the challenges and issues that they were encountering. So that's part of those really powerful elements of being able to show and connect businesses with real users. And we encourage a lot about usability testing involving people with disabilities, because again, it's that ignorance. They just don't know any better. They think, we don't have any blind users, for example, or deaf users, or whatever people with disability situations. And it's breaking down those barriers and showing them that there's either two reasons for it. One is they just aren't aware, or two, they've designed it so badly that they're not using it. They've gone somewhere else. And I know, Lane, you wanted me to talk a bit more around things like business cases today, and not enough time for that, but that's also where some of those business cases becomes a really important element of how to define them up, to show the stats, the figures, and all the rest. And I know there's some different arguments about pros and cons to that, but I've seen it work if you do it effectively.
It's really important to try and find something that the person can have in common, just something at all, which is why those cakes come in handy. I have not found anybody who's turned down one of the sweets or pastries, and at least you can start the conversation around that and understand, oh, you baked this? That's awesome. That kind of thing. It starts to open their awareness if you find something that's common. Again, the dogs. Oh, I like dogs, or oh, I have had terrible situations with dogs, where you can actually, connect with them on some other issue first, I think is really key.
One other quick thing that I don't think we've mentioned, there's community. There's also, we have real corporate global leaders now who care about accessibility. And, when we can say to a company, go to the Microsoft accessibility portal and see what they're doing, or go to Adobe's inclusive design page, or, go to any number of big companies who are really taking a lead. I find personally, it's taken a little load off my shoulders. It's not just the advocates saying it. It's the corporate global leaders who have recognized the value of accessibility. And I think that helps with the question of, you don't think it's important, but look at who it's important to. Do we have time for one more, Carrie?
We don't, I'm afraid. I'm really sorry. Okay. We're going to have to wrap up the session here. Lainey, Lucy, Stuart, thank you. It's a terrific topic, one that is close to our hearts, Inclusive Design 24 being all about the very thing that you're all trying to encourage in our community and far beyond. So thank you for sharing your wisdom on this. Thank you also to Carrie, who's been the most amazing co-host during possibly the 3 most difficult hours of Inclusive Design 24 we've ever experienced. So Carrie, thank you for your grace and patience and capability.
No problem. Glad to be here. Thank you.
I do want to say thank you very much to all our supporters in the form of Barclays Access, Adobe, Intopia, Tetralogical, InfoAxia, Intuit, WebAble TV, DQ Systems, and last but by no means least, Adrian Roselli LLC. Thank you for your help. If you are still with us, you'll have gathered by now that we've had some technical problems, but the safe place to go to find all the future talks is youtube.com/inclusivedesign24. You'll always find the latest live talk showing on that URL. If you could help us get the word out to everybody across your channels, we'd really appreciate that help. In the meantime, we will be back with you on the hour, hopefully less gremlins, but more really awesome talks. Thank you.